My name is David, and my life fell apart in a single morning. My wife emptied our son's college fund and ran off with her boyfriend. She left nothing behind, no note, no explanation. Just silence. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was my son Noah, just 9 years old, staring at me across the breakfast table, completely unfazed. "Don't worry, Dad," he said. "I already fixed it." I wanted to believe he was joking, that this was just a child's attempt at comforting his father. But then I checked the bank account. The money was back, every last cent, no transactions, no traces, as if it had never been stolen in the first place. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt something else, something I couldn't explain. Because my son wasn't just calm, he wasn't just smart, he was something else entirely. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if I really knew my own child. So, tell me, what would you do if your 9-year-old looked you in the eye and said, "I already fixed it"? David. The day started like any other. The familiar hum of the coffee machine filled the kitchen as I scrolled through emails on my laptop. Bills, promotions, junk, nothing out of the ordinary. Across the table, Noah sat hunched over his tablet, fingers tapping rhythmically on the screen. "Breakfast is ready," I said, setting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of him. "Thanks, Dad." He didn't even glance up. I watched him for a moment, taking a sip of coffee. Most kids would groan about school or complain about the eggs being too runny. Not Noah. He was different, always had been. While other kids his age were obsessed with cartoons and superheroes, Noah buried himself in coding books and puzzles meant for college students. Sometimes I wondered if he saw the world the same way I did. Vanessa wasn't home. Probably out running errands, I told myself. Though lately she'd been gone more often, her excuses vague. I didn't question it much. Maybe I should have. The first sign that something was wrong came as a quiet chime from my phone. A bank notification. "Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold." I frowned. That didn't make sense. The account should have been solid, untouched except for scheduled deposits. I opened the banking app, expecting some minor error. Instead, my stomach dropped. The college fund, Noah's future, every cent, gone. My pulse pounded in my ears as I clicked through transaction history. No withdrawals, no transfers. Just a sudden, impossible disappearance. "Noah," I said, my voice unsteady. "Did your mom mention anything about the bank account?" He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "No." I dialed Vanessa's number, straight to voicemail, tried again. Same result. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe there had been some emergency. But as I flipped to our joint credit card statements, the ground beneath me crumbled. Flights, luxury hotels, high-end restaurants. It wasn't an emergency. It was a getaway. I stared at the screen, disbelief numbing my fingers. I scrolled back weeks, months. The signs had been there all along. Vanessa hadn't been distant because of stress. She had been planning this. My mind replayed our last conversation, how she had kissed Noah on the forehead before leaving, promising she'd be home early, promising. I gripped my phone tighter and called again. Nothing. How the hell could she do this? I muttered under my breath. Across the table, Noah took another bite of his apple. "It's okay, Dad. I already fixed it." I blinked, my breath catching. "What?" Noah didn't look up. He simply kept eating, his face calm. "What do you mean, you fixed it?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. He finally met my gaze, his expression eerily composed. "You'll see." My stomach twisted. Something about the way he said it, so certain, so unconcerned, sent a chill through me. I had no idea what my son had done. End of chapter 1. I stared at Noah, my mind reeling. His words echoed in my head. I already fixed it. Any normal kid would have been crying, asking where the money had gone, worrying about their future. But Noah? He just kept eating his apple, calm as ever, as if nothing had happened. I forced a smile, trying to keep my voice steady. "Noah, what do you mean you fixed it?" He shrugged, taking another bite. "Just fixed it." I blinked. "Noah, this is serious. Your college fund is fine." I frowned, a cold knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't normal. He wasn't normal. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation over and over, Every instinct in me screamed that something wasn't right. My son wasn't just unbothered by this, he was expecting it. I got up, unable to shake the unease creeping through me. As I walked past the hallway window, I noticed a faint glow from the garage, Noah's workspace. He had always been into technology, building small robots, programming games, things that impressed his teachers but never seemed concerning. Until now. The garage door was slightly ajar. My breath hitched as I stepped inside. It looked nothing like a child's project room. Blueprints covered the walls, complex diagrams I didn't understand. Wires, circuit boards, and tools were scattered across the workbench. A laptop screen glowed with lines of code, numbers scrolling too fast for me to process. And in the center of it all, Noah, hunched over, soldering something small and metallic. I took a step back, my pulse racing. He wasn't just playing around. This was something else. Before I could leave, Noah spoke without turning around. "You should knock before coming in, Dad." I froze. Slowly, he set down his tools and looked up, his face unreadable. "Noah, what is all this?" He glanced around the room as if he hadn't considered the question before. "Just something I've been working on." I swallowed. "This isn't normal for a 9-year-old. He tilted his head. "Says who?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. There was no fear in his eyes, no guilt, no embarrassment at being caught. If anything, he looked amused. I left the garage without another word. The next morning, still unsettled, I checked the bank account again, and nearly dropped my phone. The money was back. Every single cent of Noah's college fund had been restored. But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake. There was no record of any transactions, no withdrawals, no deposits. It was as if the money had never been stolen in the first place. I turned slowly, my heart hammering in my chest. Noah sat at the kitchen table, casually eating his cereal. "Noah," my voice came out hoarse. "Did you do this?" He didn't even look up. "Told you I fixed it." I sank into a chair, staring at him. Relief should have flooded through me. Instead, I felt something else entirely. Fear. Who was my son? I couldn't concentrate all day. The numbers on my computer screen blurred together, my hands motionless over the keyboard. My mind kept circling back to Noah, to what I had seen that morning. The money was back, but it hadn't just reappeared. It had been moved, restructured, hidden. No records, no traces. Like it had never been touched. How had he done it? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe Vanessa had wired it back, realizing she'd gone too far. Maybe the bank had reversed a fraudulent withdrawal. But I knew better. I kept replaying Noah's expression in my head. The way he had looked at me, completely unfazed. As if the situation had never been a problem to begin with. As if he expected me to ask. When I got home that evening, Noah was sitting on the couch, watching TV like any other kid. He looked up when I walked in. "Hey, Dad." That was it. No hesitation, no sign of guilt. I stood there for a moment, waiting for something, anything that would make this feel normal. But nothing did. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face. "It's okay, Dad. I already fixed it. I had to know more." Moving carefully, I walked down the hall, pausing outside Noah's room. His door was slightly ajar. Inside, his nightlight cast a faint glow over his sleeping form. I stepped in. His books and toys were neatly arranged, his school bag slung over his chair. Everything looked perfectly normal, except for the phone. Sitting on his desk, half hidden under a notebook, was a sleek black smartphone, not the one I had given him, a different one, a second phone. My pulse spiked. I picked it up, the cool glass smooth in my palm. Pressing the power button, the lock screen lit up. A passcode. I hesitated. My own son. Should I even be doing this? Then I remembered the bank account. I tried a few random numbers. Nothing. Then, on instinct, I entered his birth date. The screen unlocked. My stomach twisted. I swiped through the messages. No contact names, just encrypted-looking conversations, strange symbols, fragments of words. But one message stood out. It was a draft. "Don't worry, he still doesn't suspect a thing." My breath hitched. Before I could process what I had just read, I felt movement behind me. I turned. Noah stood in the doorway, watching. For a split second, neither of us spoke. Then he walked forward, completely calm, and plucked the phone from my hand. "You should ask before going through someone's things, Dad." My mouth went dry. "Where did you get that phone?" He locked the screen again, slipping it into his pocket. "It's mine." I swallowed. "Noah, what are you doing with it?" He looked up at me, his face unreadable. "Just fixing things." A cold chill ran down my spine. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, gripping my phone tightly. The message burned in my mind. "Don't worry, he still doesn't suspect a thing." I wasn't sure who he was referring to, but for the first time in my life, I had the sinking feeling it was me. The next morning, Noah was already sitting at the kitchen table when I came downstairs. He glanced up from his cereal. "You okay, Dad?" "You look tired." I didn't answer. For the first time, I was afraid to look my own son in the eyes. I watched Noah more closely now. Every movement, every word, everything about him felt too precise, too calculated. There was no hesitation, no uncertainty. 9-year-olds were supposed to fumble through life, learning as they went. But Noah? He already seemed to know how the game was played. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. Maybe he was just exceptionally smart. Maybe all the signs I was seeing were just coincidences. But deep down, I knew better. I considered calling someone, a friend, a psychologist, the police. But what would I even say? My son is too smart. He brought back our stolen money without a trace. He has a second phone with encrypted messages. And I stopped myself before I could finish the thought. I couldn't say it. Couldn't even think it. Then I thought of Vanessa. She had run off and taken the money, but Noah had gotten it back. And for some reason, she hadn't come home, hadn't reached out. Until now. My phone buzzed on the counter. I nearly jumped. Unknown number? I hesitated before answering. "David." Vanessa's voice was barely above a whisper. "I need help." I gripped the phone tighter. "You need help?" A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "You stole from us, Vanessa. You ran off, and now you need help?" "You don't understand," she gasped. "It's not about the money. It's about Noah." Everything inside me went still. "What do you mean?" Her breath was shaky. "David, there are things you don't know. Things I didn't know either. The man I left with, Vincent, he's not just some rich investor. He's dangerous. He's been running scams for years. And now he thinks Noah is the one who exposed him." I nearly dropped the phone. "What?" Vanessa's voice cracked. "Vincent thinks Noah set him up." My mind raced. I had assumed Noah had simply taken back what was his. But what if he had done more? What if he had planted something, left a trail that led straight to Vincent? I gritted my teeth. "Vanessa, tell me the truth. Did you drag our son into this mess?" "No," she cried. "I swear I didn't. But I think Noah did." I clenched my fists, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. And then Vanessa said something that made my blood turn to ice. "David, Vincent knows where you and Noah live." I shot up from my chair, immediately scanning the windows. My pulse was deafening now. "How the hell does he know that?" Vanessa was sobbing. I think Noah wanted him to." The world tilted. Number Noah didn't just react to situations. He created them. I turned toward the hallway. Noah was sitting on the couch, flipping through a book as if none of this mattered, as if nothing was happening. I had to get us out. We had to leave. Now I moved toward the front door to check the locks. Then a loud, sharp knock echoed through the house. I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to not open that door. Noah looked up, his face unreadable. "You should answer it, Dad." I swallowed, forcing my feet to move. With shaking hands, I reached for the doorknob. I stood frozen, my breath shallow. The knocking came again, louder, more insistent. Noah sat on the couch, still flipping through his book as if the sound didn't exist. My fingers curled into a fist before unclenching. My mind raced through every possibility. Was it Vincent? Someone he sent? The police? I turned back to Noah, searching his face for a clue, for any sign of nervousness. Nothing. Just that same, unreadable calm. I swallowed hard and reached for the doorknob. The man standing outside wasn't what I expected. He wasn't a thug, not some enraged con artist looking for revenge. He was clean-cut, mid-40s, dressed in a sharp gray suit. His expression was eerily neutral, like he was just running an errand. He held out an envelope. "Vincent wants you to know. He's watching." That was all he said. Before I could respond, he turned, walked down the steps, and climbed into the back of a sleek black car. The tinted windows swallowed him whole, and then the vehicle disappeared down the street. I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath. My hands trembled as I shut the door and tore open the envelope. Inside was a single note. "I know what your son did." A cold sweat broke over my skin. I turned back toward Noah, gripping the paper so tightly my knuckles went white. "Noah, what did you do?" He didn't even glance up. "I just made sure Vincent couldn't hurt us." His voice was light, like we were discussing the weather. "That's not an answer," I snapped. He finally set down his book and met my gaze. "He stole from us, I stole back. It's fair." My stomach twisted. This wasn't how a 9-year-old was supposed to talk. This wasn't how a child was supposed to think. Before I could push further, my phone rang. Vanessa. I hesitated, then answered. "David, listen to me." Her voice was frantic. "Vincent isn't going to let this go." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Then tell me, Vanessa, what did Noah do?" Silence. I could hear her breathing, uneven and shaky. Finally, she whispered, "He drained Vincent's offshore accounts." I nearly dropped the phone. "That's impossible." My voice was hoarse, but I turned to Noah anyway, hoping, praying he would deny it. He just took another bite of his apple. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Noah, did you really do that?" He chewed, then wiped his hands on a napkin. Finally, he looked up, smiling slightly. "Don't worry, Dad." My stomach plummeted. "Noah, what did you do?" His smile widened. "I fixed it." I stared at Noah, my throat dry, my mind unable to fully grasp what he had done. He hadn't just taken back what was stolen. He hadn't just gotten revenge. He had completely dismantled Vincent's empire in a way that a grown man wouldn't have been able to. And he did it without blinking. "Vincent deserved it, Dad." His voice was light, as if we were discussing the weather. "You don't understand what you've done." My voice cracked. "You've made him desperate." Noah didn't respond right away. Instead, he took another slow bite of his cereal, chewing thoughtfully before speaking. "Desperate people make mistakes. Vincent's no different." I gripped the edge of the table, my stomach twisting. "Noah, this isn't a game." He finally looked at me, his blue eyes eerily calm. "I know." The air between us was heavy, filled with something unspoken, something far bigger than either of us. My phone rang, breaking the silence. I flinched. The number was unknown. I hesitated, then answered. "You must be so proud of your little genius." My blood turned to ice. "Vincent?" I clenched my jaw. "Leave us alone." A low chuckle. "Oh, David, you really think you're the target here?" A cold chill crept up my spine. "What do you mean?" Vincent sighed, as if he were speaking to a child. "Noah doesn't care about you. You're just convenient cover." I swallowed hard, gripping the phone tighter. "You're lying." "Am I?" His voice was mocking. "Has he ever told you why he did it? Or did you just assume it was for you?" I opened my mouth, then hesitated. Noah hadn't told me why. He never explained why he went after Vincent, why he had done it with such precision. And for the first time, I realized I had never asked. Vincent chuckled again. "Think about it, David, and when you finally figure out the truth, let me know how it feels." The line went dead. My hand trembled as I set the phone down. "Noah," I whispered, turning toward him. "Tell me the truth. What's your real plan?" He blinked up at me, expression unreadable. "I told you, Dad. I fixed it." "Vincent is going to kill us." My voice cracked, panic finally creeping in. "No, he won't." I stared at him. "How can you be so sure?" He didn't answer. Instead, he unlocked his second phone, typed something quickly, then looked up. "Watch." Seconds later, my phone vibrated, a news alert. I fumbled to open it, my pulse pounding in my ears. Businessman Vincent Rourke. Under investigation for fraud, assets frozen. I barely registered the words. Noah leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "Told you he wouldn't hurt us." I looked at him, my hands numb. "You set him up." He shrugged. He was already a criminal. I just made sure the right people noticed. I pressed a hand to my forehead, my vision swimming. At 9 years old, my son had orchestrated the downfall of a man 3 times his age, and he wasn't even worried about it. I sank into a chair, rubbing my temples. Across from me, Noah calmly poured himself a glass of juice. I swallowed, forcing the words out. "You're not just a kid, are you?" He paused, then slowly looked up, the corner of his mouth curling slightly. "I never said I was." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my son. Noah wasn't just a smart kid. He wasn't just gifted. He was something else entirely. The realization had been creeping up on me for days, but now, after everything, I couldn't deny it any longer. He didn't think like a child. He didn't react like one. He planned. He manipulated. And the worst part? I had no idea if he was doing it to protect us, or if we were just pieces in his game. I considered my options. I could go to the police. But what would I even say? My 9-year-old son just orchestrated the downfall of a dangerous businessman. They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd investigate. And if Noah really was as smart as I was beginning to believe, he had already accounted for that possibility. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion weighing me down. I had lost control. A sharp knock on the door made me jump. I turned to Noah, but he didn't even react. Heart pounding, I stood up and walked cautiously to the door. When I opened it, a wave of unexpected relief washed over me. It wasn't Vincent. It was Mrs. Holloway, Noah's teacher. She looked concerned. "Mr. Calloway," she said softly. "Can I speak with you about Noah?" My stomach dropped. I forced a nod and stepped aside, letting her in. She hesitated before speaking. I think something's wrong." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She folded her hands together, searching for the right words. "Noah is brilliant, exceptionally so. But I've noticed something. He doesn't interact with the other kids the way he should." I swallowed hard. "Go on?" She sighed. "Last week, a boy in his class failed a math test. He was upset, crying. The other students tried to comfort him. But Noah?" She hesitated. "What did he do?" I asked. She looked me in the eye. He just stared at the boy and said, "If you don't want to feel bad, don't fail next time." A chill ran through me. "He wasn't mocking him," she added quickly. "There was no malice, just complete indifference." I felt something inside me crack. This wasn't just about intelligence. This was about empathy, or the lack of it. Mrs. Holloway studied me carefully. "I don't mean to alarm you, Mr. Calloway, but I think Noah sees the world very differently from other children, maybe even differently from adults." I forced a tight smile. "Thank you for telling me." As she left, my mind raced. I had always justified Noah's behavior as intelligence, his need for efficiency, his lack of patience for emotions. But now I wasn't so sure. I stepped back into the house, closing the door behind me. Noah was sitting on the couch, his small hands resting on his lap, watching me. "Did you have a nice chat with Mrs. Holloway?" he asked, tilting his head. My breath caught. He knew. I swallowed. "How did you should be careful who you talk to, Dad." My stomach twisted. Was that a warning? A threat? I didn't know anymore. I studied his face, looking for something, anything that might tell me what was going on inside his mind. But there was nothing. Just that faint, knowing smile. A question burned in my chest, one I didn't want to ask, but I had to. "Noah, are you testing me?" His smile didn't falter. "Aren't you doing the same?" I shivered. This wasn't a father-son relationship anymore. I paced back and forth in my bedroom, my thoughts spiraling. I felt like I was on a sinking ship, and every step I took only pushed me further under. There was no one left to turn to. Mrs. Holloway had tried to warn me, but what could I say to her? She saw Noah as emotionally detached, maybe a little strange, but she had no idea of the truth. Vanessa had called, desperate and afraid, but she was unreliable at best. She was too tangled up in her own mistakes to offer any real help. The police? What would I tell them? My son is too smart. My son might be dangerous. They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd take Noah away. And if I was being honest, I wasn't sure if that would be the right choice. What if he turned on them? What if he turned on me? I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands in my hair, breathing hard. I was completely, utterly alone, but I couldn't give up, not yet. I needed to try one more time. Dinner was quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed down on your chest and made it hard to breathe. Noah ate methodically, his fork moving in perfect rhythmic motions. I watched him, searching his face for something familiar, some trace of the boy I had raised. When I couldn't take it anymore, I set my utensils down and spoke. "Noah." He didn't look up. "Yeah?" "We need to talk." He took another bite, chewing slowly. "About what?" "No more games?" I forced my voice to stay steady. "Tell me the truth. Why are you doing this?" He finally lifted his gaze, his blue eyes unreadable. "Doing what, Dad?" My hands clenched under the table. "You know what I mean." He studied me for a long moment, then shrugged. "Because I can." I felt a wave of cold wash over me. "That's not a reason." "Isn't it?" He set his fork down, leaning back in his chair. The movement was so deliberate, so composed. "You're scared of me, aren't you?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "I'm scared for you, Noah." He tilted his head, a slight frown crossing his features. "That's not what I asked." Silence hung between us, thick and suffocating. Then he stood up. "You can still walk away, Dad. I won't stop you." My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean?" But he didn't answer. He just turned and walked upstairs, his footsteps even, unhurried. I sat there, my mind racing. What did he mean, walk away? Was he giving me an out? Was this some kind of test? My skin prickled with unease. Something wasn't right. I stood up, moving through the house, checking doors and windows. Everything was locked. Everything was in its place. But there was a weight in the air, something oppressive, suffocating. And then I saw it. The garage door. It was open, just a crack. But enough. My pulse quickened. Noah never left it open. He guarded that space like it held the crown jewels. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The garage was dark, the only light coming from the soft glow of computer screens. My breath hitched. Blueprints covered the walls, intricate diagrams of circuits and devices. Screens displayed streams of code, messages in languages I didn't understand. But the centerpiece, the thing that made my knees go weak, was the digital map. Our house. Every room, every window, every entry point. I took a step back, my foot catching on a coil of wires. I nearly fell, catching myself on the edge of a workbench. Tools clattered to the floor, the noise echoing in the silence. And then I heard it. A slow, deliberate clap. I spun around, my heart in my throat. Noah stood in the doorway, his silhouette sharp against the dim light. His expression was perfectly calm. "You finally looked." My voice came out a rasp. "Noah, what is all this?" He didn't answer. He just smiled, a small, chilling smile that twisted my insides. "Welcome to my world, Dad." I stood in the garage, surrounded by flickering screens, endless streams of code, and digital maps displaying real-time surveillance of our house. This wasn't just a project. It was a system, a fully operational network tracking everything. My stomach twisted as I realized the truth. I hadn't been protecting Noah. I hadn't been guiding him. I had been a pawn in his game all along. Behind me, Noah stepped forward, his arms crossed. "You're not supposed to be in here, Dad." His voice was calm, steady, like I was a guest in his house, violating his space. I turned slowly, my mouth dry. "What is all this, Noah?" He tilted his head, as if considering whether I even deserved an answer. "It's insurance." A chill ran down my spine. "Insurance against what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Noah didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked over to his desk, settling into his chair like a king taking his throne. I forced myself to stay calm. "Tell me, Noah, what have you done?" He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "Vincent wasn't my first move, Dad." The words made my blood run cold. "He was just the beginning." I stiffened. The beginning of what? Noah's lips curled into a smirk. The beginning of making sure no one can ever hurt us again. A sickening weight settled in my gut. "How far does this go, Noah?" I demanded, stepping closer. "How much have you done?" He shrugged. Enough. Enough. That word echoed in my head. Enough for what? Enough to ensure we were safe? Or enough to control everything? I gripped the edge of his desk, trying to keep my voice steady. Noah, you're 9. You shouldn't be thinking like this. He met my eyes. You think age matters? He leaned back slightly, folding his hands in his lap. People underestimate kids, Dad. That's what makes this so easy. My stomach churned. You need to stop, I said firmly, before this gets worse. Noah didn't blink. I already accounted for this conversation. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I inhaled sharply. What do you mean? He tilted his head slightly. I knew you'd come in here. I knew you'd ask these questions, and I know exactly what you're thinking right now. I felt the air leave my lungs. He anticipated this. My own son was miles ahead of me. I wasn't guiding him. I was chasing him. Noah leaned forward slightly, studying my face. You love me, right? I swallowed hard. Of course I do. He nodded. Then trust me, I know what I'm doing. His tone was even, almost reassuring. And that's when I realized he wasn't threatening me. He didn't need to threaten me, because I was already too afraid to act. I looked into his eyes and saw something I couldn't name. Something too cold, too calculated. And I knew, if I didn't stop him now, I never would. But how? Noah stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. Just let it go, Dad. I closed my eyes. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't a choice anymore. It was an ultimatum. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled in a web of fear and doubt. Noah had taken control of everything, and I let it happen. Somewhere along the way, I had convinced myself that I was protecting him, that I could guide him, help him. But the truth was, he had been guiding me. He had been 3 steps ahead from the very beginning. And if I didn't do something now, I might never be able to. For the first time since this nightmare started, I knew what I had to do. I had to stop my own son. But I couldn't do it alone. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Vanessa's number. It rang twice before she answered, her voice tired, wary. David, why are you calling me? I swallowed hard. Vanessa, I need your help. She scoffed. You mean our help? The way Noah sees it, I don't have much left to offer. My grip on the phone tightened. He's getting worse, Vanessa. He has plans. Silence. Then finally she let out a slow, shaky sigh. You think I don't know that? A chill ran through me. Then help me stop him. She let out a humorless laugh. You don't stop Noah, David. You just hope you're on his good side. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my pulse hammering. Even Vanessa was afraid of him. Even his own mother thought there was no way out. Number? I refused to accept that. If Noah thought I was just another piece on his chessboard, then I had only one choice. I had to play the game better than him. I spent the next 2 days watching him. Every move he made, every glance, every pause in conversation. I paid attention to how he anticipated things, how he studied me, waiting for reactions. That's when I realized something crucial. Noah expected me to be emotional. He had predicted my fear, my hesitation. He was waiting for me to panic, to lash out, to react exactly the way he wanted. If I wanted to beat him, I had to be unpredictable. I had to make him believe I had given up. The confrontation had to start on my terms. At dinner that night, I sat across from him, forcing my breathing to stay even. Noah watched me carefully, his fork scraping against his plate in slow, deliberate movements. You look calm, Dad, he said. I nodded, offering a small smile. I've been thinking. He tilted his head slightly. About what? I met his eyes and made sure my voice was steady. About what you said. About trusting you. His gaze sharpened, but he didn't say anything. I forced myself to relax, picking up my glass of water and taking a slow sip. You're right. I shouldn't be afraid. I should just let things go. A flicker of something crossed his face. A moment of hesitation. I held my breath. Did he believe me? Noah set his fork down, his fingers tapping lightly on the table. That's good, Dad. I'm glad you understand. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I do. And as he leaned back, just for a second, I quietly pressed send on my phone under the table. The message flashed across the screen. I need help. Now I didn't know who would answer. I didn't know if anyone could help. But I had just made my first move. I tucked my phone into my pocket, forcing my hands to stay steady. Noah was watching me, studying me. "You seem different, Dad," he said, his voice calm but probing. I let out a small chuckle, picking up my fork. "I just realized you're right. No point in fighting it." His eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded. "Good. That's smart." I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, but I kept my face neutral. All I had to do was wait. Help was coming. I just needed to hold out until then. A knock at the door shattered the silence. My heart pounded. I pushed back from the table, forcing myself to move casually. This was it. I opened the door, expecting the police, a neighbor, someone who could help me. Instead, I found Vanessa. She shoved past me into the house, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. "David," she hissed, "what the hell did you do?" I blinked, still processing the fact that she was even here. You asked for help?" She cut me off, her voice low but urgent. I frowned. "Yes, because we need it." She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "You don't get it. You don't understand what's happening." My stomach twisted. "Then explain it to me." Vanessa let out a shaky breath, glancing toward the hallway, as if she was afraid of being overheard. "You think you're being smart, David? You think Noah doesn't already know?" A cold wave of dread rushed through me. "What?" Vanessa looked exhausted, like she had already given up. "He's been watching you this whole time. He knew you would call for help. He knew you'd try to turn against him." I shook my head, my mouth dry. "No, I was careful." Vanessa scoffed. "You really think that matters?" My mind raced. If Noah had known, why hadn't he stopped me? Unless... The thought made my stomach churn. Unless he wanted me to do this. A slow creak made both of us freeze. Noah was standing in the doorway, completely calm, completely composed. "Mom, Dad," he sighed, shaking his head slightly. "You're both being very dramatic." Vanessa tensed. I could see her fingers twitch slightly at her side, like she was fighting the urge to run. I swallowed hard. "You don't have to be scared," Noah continued, stepping forward. "I'm not angry." His voice was so smooth, so even. It should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. I forced my lips to move. "Then what are you?" Noah tilted his head, and then he smiled. "Disappointed." A cold shiver ran down my spine. Disappointed, not mad, not upset. Disappointed, as if I had failed some invisible test. Noah leaned casually against the doorframe, shaking his head. "You still don't get it, do you, Dad?" I could barely breathe. "Get what?" His smile widened slightly, almost amused. "I let you try to stop me." My knees went weak. Noah chuckled softly, as if this was all just a game. "I wanted to see what you'd do." I stared at my son, realization sinking in. I was never in control. I sat frozen, my mind spiraling, unable to grasp the full weight of what had just happened. Noah's voice echoed in my head. "I let you try to stop me, just to see what you'd do." Vanessa stood beside me, avoiding eye contact, her arms crossed tightly. She already knew. I turned to Noah, forcing the words out through my tightening throat. "You planned all of this?" Noah shrugged, completely unfazed. "Of course. It wasn't a confession, it was a statement of fact." I gripped the edge of the chair, trying to breathe. "Why?" Noah gave me a look that almost seemed amused. "Because I could." My stomach dropped. He was never in danger. He was never losing. He was in control all along. I clenched my fists. "You're just a kid, Noah. You can't control everything." His lips twitched slightly. "Can I?" I stood up abruptly, my pulse racing. "You think you're untouchable? You think you can just do whatever you want?" Noah tilted his head, studying me like I was the one who didn't understand. "I think you're asking the wrong question." I inhaled sharply. "Then what's the right question?" He leaned forward slightly, his voice eerily calm. "Why haven't I stopped you?" A cold chill crept down my spine. He wanted me to fight back. He let me believe I had a chance. And now? Now he was letting me know I never did. That night, I barely slept. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing, trying to come up with a way out. I had to leave, take Noah, run. Somewhere, anywhere, before this spiraled further. But how do you escape from someone who has already planned every possible move? My phone buzzed, a message from Vanessa. "Don't do anything stupid." My hand shook as I gripped the phone. She knew, and that meant I had nowhere to go. I was already too late. The next morning, I sat Noah down at breakfast. I forced my voice to stay steady. "Tell me the truth. What do you want, Noah?" He looked up at me, his expression unreadable. "I already have what I want." I swallowed. "Which is?" Noah's smile faded slightly. "For you to stop fighting me." A lump formed in my throat. This wasn't about control. It wasn't about power. Because Noah already had both. He didn't need to win. He just needed me to accept that I had lost. My hands trembled as I reached for my coffee, my throat dry. Noah finished his breakfast, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and stood up. Then, before leaving the table, he met my gaze one last time. "You can stop pretending now, Dad." The breath caught in my chest. Because deep down, I knew he was right. I locked myself in the bathroom, gripping the sink, my knuckles white against the porcelain. The water ran cold as I splashed it onto my face, but it did nothing to clear my mind. Noah's words replayed over and over. "You can stop pretending now, Dad." I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked hollow, like a man who had already lost. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to breathe. I had to do something. But what? Every move I had made so far, every attempt to fight back, Noah had anticipated. It was like trying to escape a maze where he had built the walls. And then, a terrifying thought slithered into my mind. What if Noah wasn't the problem? What if I was? My phone vibrated, pulling me from my spiraling thoughts. A text from Vanessa. "Meet me alone." I hesitated only for a moment before grabbing my keys. The drive was a blur, my mind racing faster than my car. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the small, run-down diner, my hands were shaking. Vanessa was already inside, sitting in the farthest booth, her posture tense. She didn't look up as I slid into the seat across from her. She just reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope, and slid it across the table. "This is your way out," she said quietly. I frowned, picking it up with wary fingers. Inside was a passport, a ticket, a new identity. I looked up, my heart pounding. "You want me to leave?" Vanessa's eyes were unreadable. "I want you to survive." The words hit me harder than I expected. I exhaled slowly. She had given up. On Noah. On fixing any of this. And now she wanted me to give up too. "I can't," I whispered. Vanessa let out a tired laugh, shaking her head. "Then you're an idiot." Maybe I was. But he was my son. I couldn't just walk away. I left the diner without touching the envelope again, my mind a tangled mess of emotions. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I felt sick. And then I saw him. Noah. Standing by the window. Watching me. Like he knew. Like he had always known. I hesitated before stepping inside. Noah was already waiting in the living room, completely composed, completely calm. He gestured for me to sit. I didn't move. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice tight. Noah smiled faintly. "To offer you a choice." A chill ran down my spine. "What choice?" He folded his hands on the table. "You keep trying to stop me, Dad, but why?" I clenched my fists. "Because this isn't right." Noah tilted his head slightly. "Define right." My pulse pounded. "People don't do what you do, Noah. Normal people don't think like this." Noah studied me for a long moment before speaking. "Then maybe we're not normal, Dad." The words sent a deep sinking feeling into my chest. I stared at him, unable to look away. Noah leaned forward. "You don't have to fight me." His voice was soft, persuasive. "You can help me." My breath caught. I blinked, certain I had misheard. "You want me to join you?" Noah's smile didn't falter. "Why not?" The room felt too small, the walls too close. For the first time, I realized I wasn't just facing a choice. I was facing a point of no return. I could walk away, take Vanessa's offer, disappear, or I could stay, step into Noah's world. Either way, there was no turning back. I looked at Noah, my heart pounding. His words still hung in the air between us, suffocating. You don't have to fight me, you can help me. For the first time, I realized something terrifying. I was afraid of my own son. If I said yes, I'd be stepping into a world I didn't understand, a world where morality didn't seem to exist. If I said no, Noah would know he could never trust me again, and I couldn't predict what he'd do next. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Then, I did the only thing I could do. I lied. Okay, Noah, I'll help you. A slow smile spread across his face. I knew you'd come around. I nodded, pretending, pushing the nausea down. This wasn't real. I wasn't going to help him. I was going to stop him, no matter what it took. Hours passed. I waited until Noah was asleep before slipping into my room, closing the door as quietly as possible. I pulled the envelope from my drawer, my hands trembling. The passport, the plane ticket, my escape. Could I really do this? Could I really leave my son behind? I hesitated for just a second, and that's when I heard it, a voice from the doorway. Going somewhere, Dad? My blood turned to ice. I spun around. Noah was standing there, watching, smiling. I couldn't speak. You really thought I didn't know? His voice was soft, almost amused. My breath came in sharp gasps. Noah, listen to me. He shook his head. You lied to me, Dad. That's disappointing. There was something in his tone, something deeper than anger, hurt. You don't understand me, he said. His voice was eerily calm, but his eyes held something else, something dangerous. I had lost control. Noah wasn't the child I thought I knew. He never had been, and I couldn't run from him. I couldn't hide, which meant I had only one option left. I inhaled slowly, then I did something he didn't expect. I stepped forward, and I pulled him into a hug. He stiffened instantly, caught off guard. I held on, whispering against his hair, my voice shaking. I love you, Noah, but I can't let you do this. Noah didn't say anything. He didn't move. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. David held onto Noah, his arms tightening in a desperate embrace. His son didn't resist, but he didn't return the hug either. I don't care how smart you are, David whispered. I don't care what you've done. You're my son. For a moment, Noah didn't move. Then, he slowly stepped back. His face was unreadable. And what if I don't want to be saved? David's heart cracked wide open. There it was, the truth he had been afraid of all along. Noah wasn't looking for redemption. He wasn't lost. He had chosen this. David inhaled shakily, searching for any trace of the little boy he once knew. But all he saw was a stranger. Noah exhaled, shaking his head. I thought you'd understand, Dad, but you never will. David swallowed hard. Then help me. Explain it to me. Noah's gaze darkened. There's nothing to explain. Either you're with me, or you're in my way. David's stomach dropped. Noah! Noah pulled a phone from his pocket, holding it between his fingers. I made arrangements, Dad. If I press this button, you disappear. Permanently. David froze. He had underestimated him. Again. Noah wasn't making threats. He was giving David a choice. So, what's it going to be? David's pulse roared in his ears. If he backed down now, he'd never have control again. If he fought, he might lose his son forever. David took a slow, deep breath. He looked at Noah, not as a father looking at his child, but as a man facing an enemy. This wasn't about parenting anymore. This was survival. You don't have the guts, Dad, Noah murmured, his lips curling slightly. David clenched his fists. Noah was right about one thing. He didn't want to do this, but he had no choice. With a sudden burst of energy, David lunged. Noah's eyes widened. He hadn't expected that. David grabbed the phone from his hand. Noah tried to snatch it back, but David slammed it to the ground, crushing it under his foot. A tense silence filled the room. Noah stared at the shattered pieces. Then, slowly, he looked up. That, Noah said, his voice eerily calm, was a mistake. David's heart pounded. Number? The mistake was letting it get this far. Noah took a step forward, a slow, deliberate step. "So what now, Dad?" His voice was soft, almost amused. "Are you going to stop me?" David squared his shoulders. "If I have to." Noah studied him for a long moment. Then something strange happened. He smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Good," he said quietly. David stiffened. "I was hoping you'd say that." His heart thundered in his chest. He knew what was coming next. David and Noah stood motionless, the air between them thick with an unspoken challenge. Noah wasn't afraid. He was waiting. His hands were steady, his expression unreadable, but David saw something beneath the surface, a glint of anticipation, of calculation. David clenched his fists. This wasn't about winning. This wasn't about control. It was about saving his son before there was nothing left to save. Noah tilted his head, a familiar smirk tugging at his lips. "So, what's your move, Dad?" David swallowed hard. This was it, his last chance. Noah's confidence was unwavering, but David saw something, a tiny tremor in his fingers, the barest flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. For the first time, David understood. Noah wasn't invincible. He was just a boy, one who had built walls so high, so strong, that even he didn't know how to tear them down. David didn't need to fight him. He needed to show him there was another way. "You don't have to do this, Noah." Noah's smirk faltered. "Yes, I do." David shook his head. "No, you don't." His voice softened. "You just don't know how to stop." Noah stiffened. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then, his breath hitched. He looked at David, and for the first time in months, maybe years, his expression wasn't cold, or calculating, or confident. It was lost. "Then what do I do, Dad?" The words burst out of him, raw and desperate. David stepped forward, heart pounding. "You don't have to fix everything. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room." Noah's shoulders shook. His breathing was uneven. David reached for him. "You just have to be my son." Noah's lips parted, but no words came out. Then, like a dam breaking, he collapsed into David's arms. For the first time, he let himself fall. Weeks passed. Noah was different now, quieter. He no longer schemed, no longer plotted. But he wasn't the same boy he used to be either. David watched him closely, wondering, was this real? Had he really changed? Or was he just waiting for his next move? Vanessa called one last time. "Do you think it's over?" David glanced across the room. Noah was sitting by the window, staring outside. "I don't know." And that was the truth. That night, for the first time in months, David tucked Noah into bed. He turned to leave, but a small voice stopped him. "Dad?" David hesitated. "Yeah?" Noah didn't look at him. His voice was quiet. "Do you think people like me can change?" David exhaled slowly, his chest tightening. "I think—" He swallowed. "That's up to you." A beat of silence. Then Noah nodded. David turned off the light, stepping out of the room. As he closed the door behind him, he realized he had no idea what tomorrow would bring. In the end, I learned that being a father isn't about having all the answers. It's about standing firm, even when the ground beneath you shakes. Noah tested everything I believed in, pushed me past my limits. But through it all, I held on to one unshakable truth. Love doesn't give up, even when faced with the impossible. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to change everything. If this story made you think, made you feel, subscribe. Because sometimes the most unexpected stories are the ones that stay with us the longest.